was a song I used to hear all the time as a kid. These are the people in your neighborhood. You may take it for granted that you know the people in your neighborhood, that you have a sense of the cross-section of the society you're living in, or of the particular city or town you're living in. But you don't. One of the most powerful sources of bias for us to overcome in the social sciences is that bias of only paying attention to people we find interesting. Maybe you went to the grocery store today. Who do you remember seeing at the grocery store? Or who do you remember speaking to at the grocery store if you spoke to a couple of people? You will only remember the people you found interesting, and you may not even be aware of it, but you will be avoiding looking at, avoiding making eye contact with, and avoiding talking to myriad other people for myriad other reasons, including, do you find them ugly? Do you find them culturally alien, shall we say? That there's some barrier between you and them that makes you think or assume they're just not the kind of person you'd want to talk to. Using the app Tinder forces you to really see the faces of the people in your neighborhood in a survey. Even if you only look at these people for 1/2 of 1 second before pressing the red X to say you're not interested, you are seeing who these people are, and perhaps not the lifestyle they actually lead, but the lifestyle that they choose to present to you and to present to the public with pride. When the reality is, in our day-to-day lives, there are all kinds of people we're ignoring all the time. I may not think that the sample of society I'm engaging with is tremendously biased, but where do I actually spend my time? At the library, specifically the university library. The gym I go to, it's not a cross-section of society at all. People went to our old gym here. They weren't even average amongst bodybuilders or athletes. They were really peculiar people at our gym. Some of them professional models, some of them bodybuilding competitors. But you look around that gym, this is not average people in our society at all. And even if there are average people going to my grocery store, I don't notice them. That's not who I talk to or not who I interact with, or not who makes an impression on me. Right? I don't even look in their faces for that 1/2 of a second that you would on Tinder. And then beyond that, if you just think about the location of the grocery store, of course there's bias, even if we don't mean to. Think about how much more I have in common with the other people who choose to live in this apartment building. Just the factors that go into that. So actually, when we were at the grocery store, one of the women at the checkout desk, she asked about where we were living and referred to it as a very expensive place to live. And I said to her, "Oh, well, actually, this is how much the rent is." And she revealed she was checking out her groceries. She was paying more rent than we do. She lives out in the suburbs, right? But there's a choice there. Do you live downtown or do you live in the suburbs? The different trade-offs, the advantages and disadvantages of that, right? We want to live as pedestrians. We don't want to own a car. We don't want to park a car. Some people in the suburbs are the opposite. We're willing to tolerate being around homeless people and drug addicts on the street every day. There are a lot of people in the suburbs who want to avoid that. Of course, there are also issues like racism and multiculturalism. Are you comfortable being around, people who don't speak English as their first language and so on, or do you want to retreat to a predominantly white suburb, right? In all my years, it's not that many years, but in all my years living in city of Victoria, I never saw or spoke to or interacted with someone who owned a rifle, who went shooting. And then the minute you start up Tinder, here are all those people. And that's what they're showing off to you. They're showing, but sometimes, it's them also wearing revealing clothes. But these are the people who go to the rifle range. And where are those people? They're here, they're there, they're everywhere. They surround me in my daily life, and I'm ignoring them, and they're ignoring me. I've never met or interacted with anyone here who does paintball. Hey, this, if you're not an English-speaking white Canadian, I think it's fair to say paintball is stereotypically a bit of a redneck sport. I think the type of people I meet in the Department of Political Science at my university, in the Department of History, in the Department of Asian Studies, they don't play paintball. And they may do things that are way nerdier and dorkier and more of a waste of time. I met a lot of people who watch Japanese cartoons as adults. I met a lot of people at the university who are into Japanese cartoons and Japanese pornography and all kinds of stuff. I don't think paintball is bad or evil. It's just stereotypically, it's associated with a certain demographic, with a certain set of religious views. Look, let's be real. Here in Victoria, have I ever met and spoken to anyone who wanted abortion to be illegal? Which is now like the litmus test for the Republican Party in the United States, for the hard conservatives in Canada or something. It's not just that it hasn't come up in conversation. I think really I've never met or interacted with those people. And back when I was at the University of Toronto many years ago, you guys have heard me complain, like the political spectrum of people I encountered at the University of Toronto went from left-wing to communist. Like I didn't even meet moderate or center, ever didn't meet or interact with those people. But again, this is the fundamental thing with the social sciences. If some of those people were there, maybe not intentionally, I was avoiding them and they weren't avoiding me. So, when you deal with pollsters, deal with people asking questions for polls, people doing serious social science research, you might sometimes be annoyed that they don't easily give up. If they've actually come to your door, knocked on your door and said, look, we're here doing a poll about water quality. That's an example where, governments and clients pay big money and say, look, we want to come into your house and test the tap water. And you say, well, I can't do it. Why don't you go test the guys next door? Like, I'm busy, whatever your reason is. And they really say, no. Like, we got to come back. We're like, no, we can't do it next door. We have to do it with you. And you say, well, what do you mean? You guys are testing every seventh house or, a random number of houses. It's like, no. But you're the random number, right? Because if you don't stick to it, if you don't stick to the randomness, then you start getting water samples that are only from people who aren't busy, right? Oh, so you got water samples, but they're all from people who are retired and who are at home between 3 p.m. and 4 p.m. when you were knocking on the door, and they're the type of people who don't refuse to let you in. No, you can't let that bias creep in. We even had a controversy. This is when I was doing social science research in Cambodia. Some people liked the spin the stick method of random house selection, where you take a stick and spin it and say, okay, we'll go and ask at that house. And it's pointed out, no, there's bias because you're more likely to choose larger houses. Right? If there are small houses and large houses, right? And when you have upstairs, downstairs situations, well, the stick never points at the second floor. It only points at the ground floor. These are really serious sources of bias. So randomness is not a great method of taking a sample. It depends what you want to do. But when you're serious about these things, with social sciences, you always have to challenge. Like, if you're doing research and you interview people, you're like, well, I don't want to interview people who seem kind of crazy or seem like they were on drugs or seem hostile. So it's like, no. Because if you refuse to interview this person, you refuse to include them in the sample for that reason, So just say, many years ago, I used a different dating app. I don't think I can remember the name. It's best probably if I don't even name the app because I know this function has changed. And that app let you search. At that time, they let you search the population for certain keywords. So I was fascinated with this as a social science research tool. Because I said, well, I can search in any location. I can search Israel and look at everyone who lists themselves as vegan. Wow. Now, I get a glimpse at what kind of person says they're vegan on a dating profile in Israel. And of course, I could switch that to Los Angeles, and I could switch that to London, England, or Germany. And you felt at least you were seeing certain trends. Like, oh, okay, over here, this kind of person is vegan, and over here, this kind of person is vegan. You had this kind of fascinating glimpse into contrasting different cultures in different ways. And, okay, let's say you set the search criteria to all of the United States of America. And you said, okay, I want to see people who are both vegan and Muslim. Now I want to compare people who are vegan and Buddhist. People who are vegan and say they speak Chinese. And you could kind of get this weird sense of a social science, research experiment. But as tantalizing as that is, that's the worst possible example of exactly this sort of bias we're talking about here. Because I'm only looking at people who interest me. I'm only asking research questions that I'm already interested in. And even then beyond that, you might have the bias of you're only paying attention to profiles where the person is attractive or there's something about that appeals to you, right? And that's That's the sort of invisible barrier that I think Tinder really breaks down. I think for many of you, even if you're not single, if you're not dating, if you're not looking around, I think you'd have to go through several hundred profiles to have this experience, right? You'd have to start a new account and you'd have to flip through at least several hundred profiles. But I think you, like me, would think, wow, these are the people in my neighborhood. Like, this is this other side of society. Not just one. There are many different sides of your society that once in a while I heard about in the newspaper or on news on TV. Like, I always knew there were these people who were against abortion and owned guns and went to do paintball. People who would proudly put up an image of themselves decapitating a hog on their dating profile. I am not kidding. There were a lot of images of women slaughtering animals and dismembering animals they'd killed, whether it was hunted or on a farm, and fishing, all this stuff. These are the outdoor activities they're proud of, right? Okay, like every so often I read about these people in the newspaper. And other stuff that comes up too. I mean, obviously the drug epidemic. You have people using coded language and overt language saying, yeah, they do drugs and what drugs they do, saying what they're into in various ways. You get to see different aspects of the culture that maybe you knew in theory existed everywhere, but you get to see it in its most immediate, its most human form. In the very strange census that people participate in, when they choose to take a picture of what they think of as their best life, what it is they're proud of, and share it with the world in the hopes of getting laid.